For more than 30 years, the Rafto Foundation has supported human rights defenders around the world.
Подчас и у меня, и у моих коллег опускаются руки. Почему? В отсутствии гласности и в полном информационном вакууме террор и насилие могли бы приобрести еще более страшные формы, еще большие масштабы.
Thorolf Rafto, a professor of economics, devoted his life to those oppressed and persecuted, whose voices were not being heard.
Det å arbeide for humanitet og menneskerett er like selvfølgelig som å puste.
Since his passing in 1986, Thorolf Rafto's legacy lives on through the establishment of the Rafto Foundation for Human Rights. Since 1987, the foundation has presented the Rafto Prize annually to individuals and organizations fighting for human rights and democracy.
Living in Uganda as a gay man myself, in one word, it is fear, full of fear.
Frank Mugisha is risking his life for the right to be homosexual. Leyla Zana was sentenced to 15 years in prison for her peaceful struggle for the human rights of the Kurdish people. Lydia Yusupova has suffered torture due to her brave efforts to document human rights violations, defending the victims of the war in Chechnya. Buddhist patriarch Thi Kwan Do spent over 30 years in prison for his struggle for human rights. He passed away in 2020 after all those years in captivity.
I am isolated, but I am not alone. I am part of the Rafto family.
At the Rafto House, thousands are educated annually. The mission is to create awareness about human rights and democracy. 30 organizations and individuals have received the Rafto Prize for Human Rights. The Rafto Foundation aims to provide long-term support and joint projects among laureates who face similar challenges.
The prize empowers, it's very empowering, gives a sense of protection.
We need this recognition, we need this empowerment, we need somebody to hold our back.
This prize is a sign that we are not alone.
We know that despite dedicating our entire lives to this work, that we might not see change. Our children might not see this change. We do it because it's the right thing to do.
Dear Rafto Laureates, dear Charbonnel, dear Edith, dear speakers, dear friends, dear all. My name is Jostein Koboltvedt. I'm the Executive Director of the Rafto Foundation, and it is a great pleasure welcoming you all, either if you're sitting at home watching this online or being here with us in the University Aula in the human rights city of Bergen for the Rafto Conference 2022. Since 1987, the Rafto Award has been given to individuals and organizations with courage who stand up for human rights. A fundamental notion in the work for human rights is that those who stand up against human rights violations against a person anywhere in the world is also standing up for the rights of all of us. On 28th of October, pro-democracy demonstrators, protesters walked through the streets of N'Djamena, the capital of Chad. They were fed up with an authoritarian government a corrupt government who had been installed in a military coup, replacing another military dictator, and who replaced another military dictator before that. When the day ended, 1,550 people were killed. 300 people were injured. More than 1,000 were detained or had disappeared, and have not been heard from since. Very few outside Chad noticed. And it is in this context that Charbonnel Nodjigoto, this year's Rafto Laureate, and his team at Association Jeunesse pour la Paix et pour la non-violence is struggling to fight torture and sexual violence. They are working to rehabilitate victims of torture. And they are teaching human rights and non-violence to youth in a country where young people too often have been used as a means of war and violence by powerful people. They do that work with great risk for themselves. Nodjigoto has himself seen torture of close family members. He's been detained several times. Their organization is facing many risks and threats. And despite that, they continue, both advocating against torture in Chad, but also internationally. Torolf Rafto, who the Rafto Foundation is named after, was supporting dissidents and human rights defenders in Eastern Europe and the Soviet Union during the Cold War. Many of them were imprisoned, many of them were tortured. He followed them closely. And he also took great risks to support them. On 5th of September 1979, Torolf Rafto himself was arrested by police in Prague in Czechoslovakia. He was brutally beaten in custody. And the scars that was left on him, both physically and here, was with him for the rest of his life. And so there is a strong connection here between Torolf Rafto and the work that this year's Rafto Laureate, Charbonnel Nodjigoto, and his team are doing. Charbonnel, you know what torture does to people, and you know what it does to a society. And that's why we are so humble. We are so glad to have you here, to learn about the work, to learn about the context you work in, and to honor the work you and your colleagues are doing. And to lead us through this day, we are very lucky to have with us Adele Mjestad. He is the director of the Norwegian Human Rights Institution. He's appointed by the parliament to run the institution scrutinizing Norway's human rights record. He has a background as a lawyer. He has worked with Norway's Attorney General's office. He has also worked with the International Criminal Tribunal for Rwanda previously. In her role as the director of the Norwegian Human Rights Institution, he is a vocal advocate for human rights, very visible in Norwegian media and public, raising issues of human rights, and also very clear defender of the independence of the institution she leads as a watchdog towards the Norwegian government. He has also been in a role. He has also been following up the work to make Bergen a human rights city. Very specifically, she has also been very eager that one of Bergen's very famous penguins at the aquarium should in some way also represent the human rights city. And because of her initiative, one of those penguins are today named after Eleanor Roosevelt, one of the drafters of the Human Rights Declaration. And if that's not a credential enough in Bergen, I would also just add that when Adele and her husband got married, you know, a young, newly married couple from Oslo could find, you know, all places in the world to go on their honeymoon. They chose Bergen. So Adele, we are glad to have you back. The floor is yours.
Good morning, everyone. It's such a pleasure to see you all and welcome you all to this year's Rafto Conference here in the beautiful University Hall in Bergen. As Jostein mentioned, Bergen is not just any city, it's the only human rights city in Norway, surrounded by beautiful mountains representing the stability and continuity and universality of human rights. It is a great honor and privilege for me to lead you guys through this year's conference. I was so enthusiastic about it that I ran up on stage long before it was my turn. So that's my enthusiasm about this. We have a brilliant program ahead of us. It will include, which I'm really much looking forward to, a keynote speech from this year's brave and wonderful Rafto Laureate. We'll have several guest speakers and musical performances from brilliant musicians, and at the end of the session, a panel discussion. And the conference is, as Jostein mentioned, being live streamed and followed not only from you guys here present, but also online. So we'll wave at them and wish them welcome too. To all our speakers, physical, digital, musicians and panelists, warm welcome to the beautiful human rights city of Bergen. Ever since its creation, the dedicated people of the Rafto Foundation have worked tirelessly and independently to promote and protect human rights and provide support to human rights defenders all around the globe, including this award. The Rafto Foundation is known for setting new human rights agendas, addressing human rights abuses and violations in places very often forgotten by others. So I would say that the Rafto Laureates, they constitute, in a sense, a human rights dream team, although they often and sadly face severe challenges where they work around the globe. So this award represents a beacon of light in a world that sometimes feels dark, not only because it is November and constantly raining, which is quite common in the beautiful human rights city of Bergen. And I can tell you that it's not that often raining in the capital, Oslo, but that's also our only claim to fame in this regard. But mostly because the world is facing some very serious challenges, setbacks and threats to human rights all around the globe. But today, being here celebrating a brave human rights defender at least gives me a sense of light as youth activist and poet. Amanda Gorman held in her inauguration poem in 2017. There is always light. There is always light if only we are strong enough to see it, if only we are strong enough to be it. And this year's laureate certainly is someone who is brave enough to be it. And by today's award, or tomorrow's award, the Rafto Human Rights Dream Team has grown stronger with the addition of this brave and wonderful new member. This new Rafto Laureate, as you already know, works to prevent what is perhaps the most serious violation of a person's fundamental human rights, torture and inhuman or degrading treatment. It's a gross violation of the individual's dignity, body and mind, and has far-reaching consequences on family and community as a whole. Freedom from torture is a universal human right. It's an absolute human right. and it's guaranteed under several human rights provisions. However, its practice remains quite widespread, particularly in places out of public view, which is why it's so important to put it under the public view, as with this award. Before we welcome our guest of honor today to the stage, we will watch a short video about his work in Chad.
Your Excellency, leaders of Rafto Foundation Press Committee, Excellencies, the Director of Rafto Foundation, Excellencies, the Board Member of Rafto Prize Committee, Excellencies, the representative of the international human rights organizations, honorable guests, all protocol observed, ladies and gentlemen. It is an honor and a privilege for me today to speak to you as a recipient of the Rafto Human Rights Prize. But first of all, allow me to convey to you the greeting and gratitude of the member of the Youth for Peace and Nonviolence Associations, AJPNV, a civil society working in Chad and was created in 2000, 10 years after the event of democracy in Chad, with the main objective to fight for the defense of human rights, democracy, and peace, and to promote the victim of torture right to rehabilitation and reparations. But like any other civil society organization in Chad, AJPNV struggled to play its role because of the interference of the state, which opposed all forms of demand for respect of human rights and fundamental freedoms. The Chadian government has ratified most of the regional, international mechanisms of human rights protections, but despite of those ratifications, human rights violations continue to occur in Chad. The government restricted access to internet, social media, no freedom of expression, prohibiting of peaceful protests. Those who raise their voice to defend these human rights violations are threatened on account of their work by the authorities. Often such attacks go without any investigation and offenders are never prosecuted. Human rights defenders in Chad are working in a hostile environment, under pressure, intimidation. They are always humiliated, arrested, and even rejected by fairly members of communities that they are trying to protect. Their permits and equipment are often destroyed. In Chad, violation can target human rights defenders themselves, their families, their organization for which they work. Those who attack human rights defenders are the same who attack their property and offices. honorable guests, ladies and gentlemen, I speak to you now. Now I speak to you, but hundreds of thousands of people in Chad are being arrested and tortured in prison, in the police station, detention center, and always in secret. And this after a peaceful protest demanding to return to the constitutional order. All of this is happening despite of institutional and narrative proliferation of laws and mechanisms prohibiting tortures. Despite of the strong mobilization of civil society organizations against torture around the world and in particular in Chad, torture is still used by the Chadian government as a tool to silence and control citizens. The fight against torture, the fight against the practice of tortures and ill treatment in Chad is the most obstacle to improve human rights standards. Torture is a crime and that can never be justified, whether as a means to fight terrorism or to protect national security or for any reasons. Yet, torture continues to exist, and prevent torture is another obstacle and a challenge for human rights organizations in the world and particularly in Chad. Fighting tortures for us today is another word, because in the country like Chad, human rights organizations which are working in that country, in their daily life, they are facing torture, psychological tortures at odd form. And in their daily life, they are facing threatened and always controlled by the government forces. The prevention of torture is crucial, but the rehabilitation of victims is equally important. Torture is a terrible stand on the victim conscience, and its effect on the society are equally destructive. The journey to overcome the painful experience and begin to heal is not easy. It takes time, a lot of courage, resilience, strength, as well as the support of family, community, people of goodwill, and organization to rebuild life of one victim of tortures. Ladies and gentlemen, honorable guests, the goal of our rehabilitation effort is to help survivors to build their life after torture. In Chad, AJPNV is fighting alongside survivors to demand that the government recognize the split of the victim and allow them to claim the right due to the physical and mental injuries, the agony inflicted on them, and the anguish caused by the government's reluctance to acknowledge their suffering and provide justice are also another form of the tortures. Our organization, despite its limited resources, is committed to stand by the victim whatever the need arises to accompany them, step by step, to make the right to reparation and rehabilitation of the victim a reality. The objective of the rehabilitation is recognizing the victim and his individual needs, as well as his social and cultural environment. We consider in our organization that the resistance of the state to listen to the cries of the victim of torture is another psychological torture that is more hard than the physical tortures. As service provider, we are in the unique position to help survivors to achieve their goal through the knowledge of the right to reparation. The fight for the prevention of tortures requires individuals, families, community, national, international mobilization to defend the survivors and those at risk of being tortured, as well as the respect and strict application of convention and other international and regional instruments that the government of Chad has ratified. Why this is important? This is why I cannot end my remark here without launching an appeal to Chadian authorities to transform the commitment made before the international opinion in a concrete action by applying the text, law, and convention they have ratified. Ladies and gentlemen, I cannot finish my remark without reintegrating an appeal for help to people of goodwill, the International Human Rights Organization, to foundations who are here in this room, who are listening to us from wherever they are, that their help, whatever the finance amount or in equipment, medical equipment, will be welcome to allow us to carry out our work and to provide medical, psychological, social, legal assistance to those thousands of desperate victims of torture in Chad, and also to defend human rights. Together, we will do better. Thank you.
Thank you for that very inspiring talk, and I'm sure we all can agree with you that together we can do better and that we all should do better, and thank you for being here today. While we reflect further on this speech, I'll introduce you our first musical performance of the day. Johanna Saaek is a 27-year-old cellist from Gothenburg. She has a bachelor's degree in music performance and is now doing her master's degree here at the Grieg Academy in Bergen. The cello is said to have the same range as the human voice, and it's apparently this feature that gives it the power to evoke strong emotions. I don't know personally if that's true, but here we have a perfect opportunity to find out. Please give a warm welcome to Johanna Saaek. Beautiful music with us, Johanna. I must admit that before this event, my knowledge about the history and current political situation in Chad was sparse. Thankfully, we have present here today brilliant academics who can compensate for that and provide us all with a deeper insight into this important topic. Therefore, I'm very happy to introduce to you Ketil Fred Hansen, who is a Norwegian historian and a professor with a PhD in African history, today working as a professor in social sciences at the University of Stavanger. Please give him a warm welcome. Ketil, the floor is yours.
Thank you. It's very difficult. I've been working with Chad for 20 years, and I've been given 10 minutes to distill this knowledge to you. Probably I have to admit that if you don't know much about Chad contemporary politics, it may seem very, very complicated. And why? Take the recent events, for example, the recent events now on last year's April 20. Mahatma Kaka Debi took power from his father, Idris Deby, the president. He had been killed on the battlefields. Rebel had wanted to keep him out for close to 30 years as Chad's president. However, who killed actually President Deby, the father? And I have to say the father because the son took power. So who killed actually the President Deby, the father, has never been investigated. Probably because he was killed by someone very close to him and not by the rebels, as the official story goes. Today's president, Mahatma Kaka Debi, led the presidential guard when his father was killed. And Kaka managed to be nominated Chad's interim president for 18 months, the day his father's death was made public. On 20th of October this year, some 3 weeks ago, these 18 months as interim president formally ended, and new presidential elections were supposed to take place. However, a few days ahead of this, Mahatma Kaka Debi, the son, made himself nominate president for another 2 years. A huge, relatively peaceful demonstration against Debi, the son's new presidency, took power in N'Djamena, Chad's capital. Mahatma Kaka Debi's presidential guard, his investigating army, the secret police, stopped demonstrators by killing them. Officially, some 50 persons. Unofficially, at least 200 were killed. Many more were wounded, and some place between 1,000 and 2,000 persons were imprisoned. Many of them sent away to the high-security prison Kuruturu in the midst of the desert. 3 weeks after these demonstrations, today, the relatives of the detained persons do not know where they are or if they are still alive. Thursday, 2 days ago, I phoned a good friend of mine in N'Djamena. One of his cousins was still missing. There is nothing I can do about it but to wait for my cousin to be released from prison or to be declared dead, he told me, with a voice indicating that this experience was not new to him. Okay, why then is understanding political history in Chad difficult, complicated? Of course, the fact that today's president has the same name as the late president, both are named Deby, father and son, makes it a bit complicated. The fact that the killing of Deby, the father, was never investigated indicates also that politics in Chad includes a lot of hidden issues, events that become food for rumors and even for disinformation. And between the parentheses, I have to admit that I have now, in a way, contributed to these rumors, because I told you that probably the president, Deby, the father, was not killed by the rebels. And that is a contradiction to the official story. So this contributes to the rumors. Another factor making contemporary political history in Chad complicated is that political alliances are very weak. Political alliances shift rapidly, quickly, both among the power holders and among the rebels. Some well-placed within the regimes get angry or even just disappointed and enters a rebellion against his former collaborators or friends. One example of this is the shift of alliances. Could be, as you see on the pictures, the former president Deby, the father, and his nephew, Timan Erdimi, who used to be Minister of Oil. But Timan Erdimi got angry at his uncle in 2005 and started a rebellion to oust him from presidential power. Twice he was very close to manage this, and twice he was stopped by Deby's army with the help of the French military. For the second try in 2008, Erdimi was sentenced to death in absentia by Deby the father. This year, August 2022, the death sentence was removed. Timan Erdimi was given amnesty by Deby the son and welcomed home again to Chad. I could have given you loads of more examples, but I won't. My point here is only that you should know that political alliances in Chad are fluid and changing, both within the political establishment and among the rebels, and also between the two of them. Some transfer from the regime to become a rebel and is co-opted back with money and positions back to the regime. Shift of alliances is a normality in Chad, and decisions can therefore be taken and retaken and retaken. In political Chad, a decision is not worth anything before the decision is executed. Okay, this was only a teaser. Yeah, this was a teaser. Politics in Chad is complicated because of the rapidly changing alliances. And two, politics in Chad is violent. Politics is fought more with actors than with words, and these actions may include military might, weapons, threats, and fear. So if you only remember these two things, of the changing political alliances and the personalization of politics and the violent political culture in Chad, I'm happy. I could have spoken about the rule of Hissène Habré, the US and France-sponsored president in Chad from 1982 to 1990. Habré that created the brutal secret police corps who made 40,000 people disappear during his 8 years in power. I could have talked about the detention center he created next to the presidential palace. A former swimming pool just called La Piscine in Chad was one of the worst torture centers in Africa during the 1980s. I could have talked about the trial Hissène Habré faced in Dakar, Senegal in 2016, where he was convicted to lifetime prison for crime against humanity, war crimes, and torture during his reign in Chad. I could, of course, also have talked a lot about his successor, Idriss Deby, the father, who accomplished the successful coup d'etat against President Deby. And I could have described how people in the streets of N'Djamena cheered and applauded the arrival of the coup makers. Je viens pas avec l'or ni l'argent, je viens avec la liberté. I didn't come with gold, I didn't come with money, I come with freedom, he told the people on the radio speech on December 2nd, 1990. I could have elaborated on how this president, who announced that he arrived at liberty, managed to postpone the first presidential election for 6 years, and then won the so-called democratic elections in 1996, 2001, 2006, 2011, 2016, 2021. I could have told you how this president managed to stay in power for 30 years, but I won't. I want you only to remember that politics in Chad is personalized, and politics in Chad is violent. Political alliances in Chad are fluid. That's what I want you to remember. Thank you.
Thank you, Ketil, for distilling 20 years of knowledge into 10 brilliant minutes of context for us to better understand the context in which AJPNV operates. And to learn more about that, we will see a video interview with Charbonnel's great colleague, Nebignon Edith, who works at AJPNV with particularly women's rights and children's rights.
Je m'appelle Nebignon Edith. Mon travail dans l'association Jeunesse pour la paix et la non-violence est de sensibiliser les femmes contre la mutilation génitale et la violence faite aux femmes, les enfants, tout ça. Dans l'association, on organise des ateliers avec les femmes victimes de la torture, de violence. Deux fois, on se déplace nous-mêmes. On vient de porte en porte pour se renseigner, oui, pour les soutenir moralement. Et même financièrement, on les soutient. Je connais une fille, elle a été violée par un homme un peu âgé. Et la fille était vraiment traumatisée. On l'a amenée chez nous. On a travaillé avec elle. Et petit à petit, avant, elle était vraiment traumatisée. Mais maintenant, ça va. Maintenant, ça va mieux. Elle a eu son bac l'année passée. Elle cherche à aller à l'université cette année. Comme tout Tchadien, j'ai vécu dans la violence. La vie est pleine de violence. Au Tchad, vraiment, on travaille vraiment dans la menace, dans l'intimidation, oui, dans la peur. Donc, on ne connaît pas ce qui va arriver. On travaille vraiment dans la pression, sous la pression. Donc, on ne connaît pas ce qui peut arriver à tout moment. Donc, c'est un peu difficile. Quand même, on travaille, oui. On travaille, oui. On s'efforce à travailler, même les gens qu'on a sous nos charges. Ils viennent toujours, ils n'ont pas peur. Ils n'ont pas peur, ils viennent toujours. Quand on fait l'appel là, les gens viennent, on travaille avec eux. Donc, c'est ça qui m'a beaucoup motivée. Le courage des victimes, c'est ça. On croit à ça, ça va changer. Ça va changer. Parce que tout le Tchad est au courant qu'on a gagné un prix des droits de l'homme avec Rafto. Vraiment, les gens sont vraiment contents. Les journalistes de là-bas même ne parlent que de ça. Vraiment, je ne sais pas, les mots me manquent même. Sinon, c'est vraiment génial de venir recevoir le prix. Les gens sont vraiment intéressés. Ils disent que le prix, là, ce n'est pas pour toi, le président, c'est pour le Tchad.
Thank you so much, Edith. Edith is present here today, representing all of the incredibly brave people at the AJPNV. Thank you. You said that you were motivated by the bravery of the victims, but I can assure you that we are very motivated by the bravery that you describe by describing your work. Our next speaker, Delphine Djiraibe, is a Chadian human rights lawyer and activist. Currently, she is chief attorney at the Public Interest Law Center in Chad. In 2004, she received the Robert F. Kennedy Human Rights Award for her extensive grassroots organizing and advocacy work. She's also another incredibly inspiring woman who, for more than 3 decades, has been promoting human rights, democracy, development, and the rule of law in Chad. Please give her a warm welcome.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's my great pleasure to be here today. And I cannot tell you how proud I am on behalf of my junior colleague, human rights defender, Charbonnel. I know Charbonnel for a long time, and I can remember the first time when he came to my office. He brought me a T-shirt from his sensibilization work, and letting me know that he created the association Jeunesse pour la Paix et la non-violence. So I am so proud he kept on working on the situation that was described here. And I can echo that by saying that Chad is a very difficult country to be human rights defender in. And when someone, a youth, a gentleman, who can do everything else to be worth it, to gain his life, dedicate his life to be a human rights defender, I think you all should be proud of him and say, keep it going, keep up the good work, my brother. Thank you. It is not easy to be speaking after all those great speeches that already show you what is Chad, what is the work that Charbonnel is doing in Chad against torture. But that gives me the opportunity to just change my presentation and focus on the situation really that human rights defenders are facing in Chad right now, related to the 20 October event that occurred in Chad and which we call the Black Thursday. It's really the Black Thursday because we have seen none of those things before in a single day, that the security forces come out with all the big arms that you can imagine to shut on mainly youth and women that came out to ask for justice and for equality. It's just a nightmare. And I was there, Charbonnel was there, Edith was there to witness what has happened. The human rights houses were identified and the bullet was directed to their houses. And people have been killed in front of our houses. People have been killed in the road. And when the dead people have been removed and brought to hospitals, they will put there for days. Families were not allowed to go get bodies to buried, and they go bad. I cannot tell you, when I saw that, it's not sustainable that a government could kill its own people and even leave their bodies till they go bad and prevent the families even to give them a dignity burial. It's just awful. And this is the situation we are trying, Charbonnel is trying to help victims. But for the situation that is occurring now, victims were obliged to hide themselves. The ones that are wounded will be removed to hospital to be killed. So families have to take them home and to hide them. And imagine, with a leg, with many wounds on them, you have to be hid with no proper health care. You will die. There is no issue, you will die. So that is the situation that is going on in Chad right now. And I want tell you how the justice system is, because when the overall situation is as described, violence, corruption, you cannot have access to public services. Everything is about money. And the people that earn money to be able to access public services are the ones in the power. So the majority of the population is left down. No water, no electricity, no healthcare system. You cannot go to hospital and get treated. You have to pay and you have no money. For more than 2 months, all the magistrates were in strike because they are not well paid, and we have no justice at all. Even cases that were pending in front of the jurisdiction were stuck, nothing, and people are staying in jails. The ones that were recently arrested was deported 2,000 kilometers away from N'Djamena, the city capital. That was called the high security prison. But there is nothing that allows the government to do that, because we have signed all the human rights conventions. Chad is referred to as a really good student when it comes to conventions, to ratifying conventions. We have ratified all. Our national laws are the best in Africa. But the problem is that nobody is following the rules. Nobody is applying the rules. Nobody is respecting, at the first line, the government. So it's like a no man's land. And when you see that Charbonnel came out in the morning and go to the office to do his work, when you are a human rights defender and you wake up and go for your work, you never know if you will come back. And that is really the situation we are living in. You go and you say bye-bye to your people. If I'm come back, that's really God's protection. So that put a lot of pressure on human rights defenders. A lot of pressure, because you never know what would happen to you, when it would happen, and you have to keep it going. Because if you don't do it, then nobody will do it. We mainly rely on the international community to give a chance to human rights to be respected in Chad. But we found out that also is a nightmare, because the international community are Assembly of States. They deal with the state of Chad. They sometimes show that they are concerned with the human rights situation, but at the end of the day, nothing is happening. Until the 20th of October, we are crying, we are asking the international community to stop the horror, the terror that is going on in Chad. Because till now, I was here when I received a message from a colleague saying that they are continuing hunting human rights defenders, hunting youths that are supposed to be from a political party that call for the demonstration. They can come to your house and they will fetch you. When they show that you have flyer, le drapeau, comme on dit, the bleu, jaune, rouge, in your house, they will tell you are from the transformateur, and they will arrest you, and you disappear. Nobody knows where you go. And it's just a planification of terror, because you have no other explanation that a government can come out and try to disperse the manifestation where people came out with nothing on end, even if they say they have like stones. And is that the reason to come out with all the armies and to shoot people to death? They won't give you a chance to live because they will choose to shoot you where you can be dead right away, on your head, on your heart. And if you fall and don't die, they will come back and give you le coup de grâce. So the government has planned to kill people for two main reasons. Because this is a system that wants to stay in power forever. The father stayed in power, the son make a coup d'etat and wants to continue the same system. The second reason is that they want to give a signal to people. You don't have to come out again because you know what happened to others is waiting for you. So in such a situation, could we talk about justice system that we can help people go to? It's just impossible. And where we are standing for now is to make the change in power. This system needs to step down and to allow Chadian people to elect the proper leaders that can lead Chad for justice and for equality, for the respect of human rights. And that could be done with all the efforts that you be given. And I will finish by saying that getting a prize from an international institution is a kind of a big protection, not only for Charbonnel, but for all human rights defenders in Chad. Because the government of Chad is afraid of his opinion or of his reputation when it comes to human rights defenders that are recognized internationally. And that adds to the protection that God is giving us. So I want really to thank Rafto, to thank Rafto University, to thank you all for being here, for giving support to Charbonnel and to human rights defenders in Chad. This recognition is really important and key because we feel that we are not alone, that our voices are heard abroad, and that if something happened, we know that people are standing behind us. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Delphine, for that incredibly strong speech. I don't know about you guys, but it left me feel a little bit speechless. And for the incredibly important work that all of you do, reflecting, I think, on Eleanor Roosevelt's famous notion that it's better to light a candle than to curse darkness, which is what you are really doing in those extremely difficult circumstances. Thank you for being here with us today. We are about to head into a short break for those attending in person, obviously, and also for those attending digitally. There will be a panel discussion at the end of the conference with Charbonnel and anti-torture activist Vivienne Nathanson and senior human rights advisor Ngueuleu from World Organization Against Torture. And if you go to the website here, you will see some questions that we want to ask to our brilliant panelists. And you can all contribute by voting for the question that you really want them to reflect on. And then we will let that be decisive for how we approach this panel discussion. And you can use the code word Rafto when you enter into this. For those of you attending this seminar online, this might be a good opportunity to take off your shoes, have some coffee or tea, and eat some chocolate, which, if it was up to me, would be a minor human rights, or considered a human rights. But for the rest of you being present here today, it's a good idea to keep your shoes on. But you can, and I cannot promise you chocolate, unfortunately, but there is coffee and pastry, and the warm company of others. Please feel free to maybe make a new human rights friend throughout the break, which will last for approximately 20 minutes. For the people in the front row, there is, the exit is most easily accessible through the door in the middle of the aula, to the left of the stage. The rest of you can exit through the doors in the back. And have a great break, and we'll see you all in 20 minutes. Welcome back, everyone. I hope you had a great break, with or without shoes. I also want to say that if you look outside the windows now, you'll see that Amanda Gorman was absolutely right, because there is light, there is almost sunshine in the beautiful human rights city of Bergen. So I'll take back every word I said about it always raining in Bergen, which is obviously not true. Now we're going to have some sun, and I don't think that's a coincidence. We will now hear from 2 more speakers before moving on to the panel discussions. Please remember that you can still vote for questions for the panelists if you go to the website on the screen behind me. The insights of people with lived experiences are extremely valuable in preventing and combating human rights violations. Their voices remind us that human rights are not abstract concepts on paper. Their purpose is to provide real protection to real people in real life situations, albeit often falling short. Our next speaker has experienced treatment that human rights obligations strictly and absolutely forbids: torture. Kolbassia Haoussou left Chad, fleeing torture for Britain in 2004. He co-founded Survivors Speak Out, a network led by survivors advocating for survivors of torture. Kolbassia is now the department head for Freedom from Torture's newly founded Survivor Empowerment Directorate. Let's hear what he has to say.
Dear ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to speak to you today. And I'm really honored. And as well, I'm very sorry that I'm not able to be there in person with you, and especially to be there in person. Congratulations, my dear friend Charbonnel, for his achievement. What you have done, Charbonnel, is extraordinary. And it requires gut, courage, and really strength to do that. I'm really, really proud of you, of your achievement. It's something that many of us could not achieve, being there, supporting torture survivors and sexual violence survivors. Congratulations to you. My name is Kolbassia Haoussou. I'm originally from Chad, but now I live in the United Kingdom as a refugee. I have seen torture from the youngest age. As a child, I have seen my father persecuted. Him and his best friend were tortured. My father managed to escape, but his best friend did not manage to escape, so he was tortured to death. Until today, we did not see his remaining, and we don't know nothing. That's many, many years back. I ended up living in a refugee camp with my grandmother and with my younger brother. And I have grown up. And I ended up also being tortured and sexually violated. The experience of torture is so traumatic that you want to shut everything down and you start living the life of fear. You isolate yourself and you even don't want to stand for yourself and don't want to stand for your right. And torture impact not just individual, impact family, impact community, and torture is filled with stigma and shame. I have lived in Chad where I have seen my neighbor being persecuted, being tortured. I have seen my best friend dad being tortured to death. Until today, we do not know where his body is. I have seen my parents try to educate us. When we are out there speaking to people, we need to be very mindful of what we're saying, because you never know who's who. And whatever you share can come back and haunt you and haunt the entire family. So we need to be very mindful of what we say. I have seen the entire community, entire society live with fear because they know what can be and what is the consequences or what is the impact of torture. How could we live that type of life? But the reality is that's our reality. And at times in Chad, torture was systematic. And I hope that the new leader now move away from that, more young, more motivated to push and to move the country to a better place and to a better direction. torture impacts you physically and as well psychologically. And it's not something that you just shut it down to close it. Torture follows you. It's mental, it's psychological. And it's really important that torture survivors receive the need that they require in order to rehabilitate from the impact of torture. I have been rehabilitated as an organization in the United Kingdom. It's called Freedom from Torture. And I've seen how important rehabilitation is. It allows me to move away from thinking how bad I am, how destroyed I am, how broken I am, to understanding what is torture done to my brain, to my mind, and moving away from that to a position where I accept my past as a past and looking into my present and moving to the future. And also it allows me to speak up for torture survivors and also sexual violence survivors, to be able to galvanize community to understand that torture is wrong. So torture is not good for the community, it's not good for the society, it's not good for individual. And also to allow me to create a network of torture survivors that we can speak out so that we can eliminate stigma that attached to torture and sexual violence. And it is really important for me to be able to go through that rehabilitation and understand that rehabilitation is good. That mental health is like any other health that needs to be addressed. One thing that I must say that state and government need to invest into providing rehabilitation to torture survivors. Otherwise, it's really difficult for people to get the rehabilitation that they needed in order to move to the next life that they need to build for themselves, away from the impact and the challenge that torture has brought to them, to move a life of no silence, no fear, but a life that's full of joy and happiness. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity. And also, again, congratulations to you, my friend Charbonnel. Thank you, and good luck.
Our next great speaker here today is the Secretary General for the International Rehabilitation Council for Torture Victims, IRCT. IRCT is a global network for organizations, independent experts, whose work is to support survivors of torture through rehabilitation, as we just heard about in this talk. From an initial one-year project involving 4 Danish doctors and a few dozen torture survivors, the IRCT has evolved over 5 decades to become an internationally recognized global movement. When handing over the torch, one of the founding mothers of the organization, Dr. Jeunesse, said to Lisa shortly after her appointment as Secretary General, "The work is not easy. You will need a lot of energy," which I think is a general observation that describes all of our speakers today. It certainly describes Lisa, so please give her a warm welcome to the stage.
Good day, everyone. It is my enormous pleasure to be here with you to talk about rehabilitation, to talk about the road, the pathway to rehabilitation, and to celebrate that you and the Rafto organization have decided to give the prize this year to Charbonnel. Charbonnel and his organization in Chad deserve this prize like no others, but I could say like many others. In fact, the 160 organizations that are a part of the International Rehabilitation Council are out on the front lines. Like Charbonnel, many of the organizations would look just like this. They are working in conditions that are very similar to Charbonnel's. Charbonnel is actually a very good friend and colleague, as you just heard, of Kolbassia, who's now working for Freedom from Torture, one of the member centers in Britain. All of these frontline defenders are working with the idea that rehabilitation is a right, and under the Convention Against Torture, Article 14, there is something called the right to rehabilitation. So states are actually obliged to provide rehabilitation. But when they don't, good folks like Charbonnel and his organization, like Kolbassia and his organization, like the other 160 members around the world do. So we're talking about dream teams. I think you said at Rafto you have a dream team. I would like to encourage that we talk about the human rights community and the anti-torture activists as part of your dream team. So maybe you can invite them all into your dream team here in Rafto. Inga Genefke was one of those. Charbonnel is another. We're many in this organization. I would call it the human rights dream team, the anti-torture or the global fight against torture. So who are we? As said, it's 160 independent organizations. These organizations were started with the philosophy that the right to rehabilitation is a fundamental right, and rehabilitation demands a special kind of service. So there's a medical practice, there's a psychological practice, and that has to be practiced by professionals. We also, though, are well aware that the over 60,000 survivors who are treated every year, Charbonnel, I think your organization is responsible for like 300 survivors a year treated. There are many others, as I've said, so we're reaching over 60,000 survivors with this kind of professional rehabilitation treatment. But they're also having the ability to seek justice. So our strategy is working on both seeking justice and healing. And they go hand in hand. But today we talk primarily about the rehabilitation. And of course, all of the organizations in IRCT are also working to the Sustainable Development Goals. And you would know them well, but among others, number 16, which is about peace, justice, access to justice is one of the main focuses for this organization. So we have a strategy which says our vision is that survivors have access to care, the right to rehabilitation, prevention, but also that we will work on access to justice, as I talked about. Healing and justice, two legs of the strategy. They're quite different, and in some ways, in this organization, and Charbonnel, I think your organization would notice it, it's the combination that makes this a bit unique. We're both psychologists, psychiatrists, doctors, social workers, and we're also lawyers, human rights lawyers. So combining this special way of working is what really makes this organization unique. It allows us to document in such a way with forensic evidence that's been gathered to actually take these cases to court. So for IRCT, this is quite unique. As you can see all across the world, you'll also see some countries where you would say, why isn't there a torture rehabilitation center there? I would assume in this community it's quite obvious why it is very difficult in some countries to at all have an organization. So I would say, Charbonnel, the fact that your organization is alive and thriving, it's not something that any of us should take for granted. This is that walk every day coming out of your compound and walking down the dusty street with the kids and the goats and the traffic. That walk every day to the office is, as other speakers have said, it's a dangerous walk. And survivors take that walk every day as they're coming to treatment. And the human rights activists who are part of these organizations take that walk every day. So all around the globe, you have people who are out there, I would say literally risking their lives to make sure the rehabilitation journey is a professional one and a safe one. So just to give you a perspective, over 60,000 survivors come through the rehabilitation process every year. It's not to say that their treatment is completed, because as some of you might imagine, the damage that's been caused is so pervasive that it can take longer than a year sometimes shorter. But the point is that all of these survivors are in contact with professionals who care, who are there for them, and during COVID, they were also there for them in the context of telehealth. So though we had COVID, which was a global pandemic and locking down many people from getting to see their good colleagues in a rehabilitation center, many of us could go online. And that provided an incredibly valuable lifeline to survivors. They could see their therapist, their psychologist, their doctor, if there was an internet connection, right? So here we have a little bit of the technology playing into it, but the impact of being able to work in that way and also do remote evaluations helped a lot of these survivors. So a couple other facts on the screen here might shock you, but over half of survivors are women. So men and women are equally susceptible and the victims of torture. Often it's around people around the poverty line who are subjected, and then there are a lot of people who are subjected out of the group we're serving to sexual violence. And this is, among others, what Charbonnel's organization is working with, because in many countries, the technique of rape is a technique of war, and it is determined as torture, and therefore we're treating a lot of the victims. Of course, the last number on your screen is the number of people who are reporting that they've been tortured because they are LGBTQ. That number is a dark number. There are probably many more, because in many countries, it's under penalty of death. You would say that you're gay, LGBT. This is not a number that we are fully confident is the only part of the problem. We think there are many, many more citizens who are still suffering as LGBTQ gender identifiers. What we've been able to do in this organization, and if you think about a world that's quite fragmented, where being in agreement on many things is difficult, this organization, with its 160 members, over 4,000 health professionals, agreed upon some rehabilitation standards. So, I repeat, how many of you think that was an easy task to do? Raise your hand. To get psychologists, psychiatrists, doctors to agree upon 17 basic standards that all these centers should be using. Vivienne knows this very well as a doctor sitting up front. Not easy, people. Anyhow, we got there, and these standards are now what unite us and what we can train on. We can talk about with a common language. When we say good rehabilitation work, it means you are interviewing your clients in a trauma-informed way. It means that your psychiatrists, psychologists, doctors are listening, involving the survivor in their rehabilitation journey, that you're also responsible for a strong organization that's transparent when a survivor comes, that explains the journey, how much service will they get, how long will it take, who will be involved, that makes sure that translation or interpretation is possible, that the family is also informed and involved, things like this that make the rehabilitation journey much better. And I'm sure Charbonnel can talk about it, but many of the organizations have now been working to actually implement these standards, and our secretariat is able to provide support to do more of this. So we have a joint understanding. The other part of the rehabilitation journey is, of course, as Kolbassia was talking about, it's the mental state you're in after this incredibly difficult crime has happened to you. Your trust in human beings is destroyed. Your mental state is difficult. So the rehabilitation journey is one piece, the psychosocial care. There's also the physical care, so physical therapy or occupational therapy. But many survivors also say that, in fact, the most important thing for them is the safety of their family, being able to provide for their family. Many people say, yeah, but if I don't have money to pay for rent, I cannot possibly go through a mental, therapy session here. So we are experimenting in IRCT with actually combining the rehabilitation journey with provision of some kind of job training, psychosocial economic dependency or independency training for survivors. So these two things go hand in hand, so people can actually focus on their mental health while also improving their socioeconomic situation. And the last part, super important, is to involve. So survivors are now, and have always been, but we're making it more prominent, that survivors are in the center. Kolbassia is now director in the organization in London. He's a survivor. He brings that experience with him to the decision-making table in his organization, and we in RCT are working more and more to bring survivors to the center, to give them the center stage, to hear their voices, and to provide safe spaces, whether it's talking with parliamentarians, talking with officials in your municipality, just talking about your country and your issue, because you feel you have that obligation having come out of a place like Chad, and you feel an obligation to your citizens that you left, if you had to flee, to actually tell that story. So we're trying to give that space, and that's what this organization is all about. So just 3 brief pictures, but it's really hard to get to the place where you can tell the story. And we can't underestimate that that's a bold journey that people make to finally speak out. But that this kind of speaking out, it really helps you to get back on your feet and establish yourself and gain agency again. I'm a human being, I have a right to speak, I will use my voice if I feel I'm able to. If I don't feel I'm able to, that's also fine, but this sometimes helps public speaking. And last but not least, again, Kolbassia, empowering survivors, giving them a platform to speak out is just essential in the global fight. So I would say back to Rafto, thank you very much for celebrating the work of Charbonnel. And I know Charbonnel says it's not just him, it's the entire community of the rehabilitation centers around the world. So we appreciate very much your recognition. Thanks a lot. And sorry I went over time.
Thank you for that very engaging talk and for your energy, Lisa, and for the incredibly important work that you and your organization does. While we let that sink, we will listen to another wonderful musician, Thea Wang, who is also from the great and sunny human rights city of Bergen. Thea recently released her debut album, While He Is Still Asleep, on Made Records. The album was very well received by critics in Norway. One wrote, "With a deep intensity, random encounters, loneliness, and love are transformed into short stories that opens doors into others' lives, where we get to be guests for a little while." So here's your chance to be that special guest. Give her a warm welcome.
Every morning she gets out of bed while he is still asleep. Goes to the bathroom, drowns the floor in tears, dresses up in her fears. She's constantly sad, but she don't wanna talk about it. He's always mad, and all they do is fight about it. Oh, 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 oh. You stay with me another night, please come back into bed. I could stay with you 1,000 nights, but what's been said's been said. such a fool. Girl, you don't know what you're missing. She said it's fine, Maurice. I do not need your love and kissing. Oh, 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 oh. It's an honor to be here and to celebrate you, Charbonnel. And the last song I'm going to play is called Tell Me About It. And it's a song that maybe represents some of the people behind the statistics and their daily lives or thoughts. Tell me about it, how it started, what you said, who I used to be, I can't seem to remember. Ooh, tell me about time, your face and mine in photographs, hiding in the bushes, thinking summer would last. Tell me about tell me about joy, sunlit eyes and hummingbirds, robots in the winter singing spring is coming. Tell me about change, restless hearts and hummingbirds, lullabies and vinyls crackling, sounds of silence. Tell me about I need to remember new beginnings, birds returning with another spring.
Thank you, Thea. That was absolutely beautiful. Before we invite our brilliant panelists to the stage, we will just use a couple of minutes to set up the stage for the panel discussions. I would like to take the time to introduce to you two of our new panelists joining, in addition to our guest of honor here today, Charbonnel, who you've already met. Dr. Vivienne Nathanson is a medical physician and lecturer in public health. She is principal advisor on public health to the World Medical Association and also a member of the Board of Trustees for the UN Voluntary Funds for Victims of Torture. And we also have with us today Dr. Isidore Ngueuleu, who is a senior human rights advisor from the World Organization Against Torture, OMCT, in charge of sub-Saharan Africa. OMCT is the largest non-governmental organization in the world working to abolish torture, arbitrary detention, and other forms of violence. Dr. Isidore Ngueuleu coordinates participation of African civil society representatives at the UN Committee Against Torture in Geneva. So please join me in welcoming him and Charbonnel back again on the stage. So if you can sit here, Charbonnel, and then Isidore and can sit here. Thank you. So, welcome, and since you are new here on the stage with us, I wanted to start with the two of you. Vivienne, perhaps you could start by tell us a little bit about your experience working against torture and what you see as the largest obstacles or opportunities in this fight. We've heard a lot about it today, but it would be interesting to hear your view.
Well, I mean, I've been involved in this work for 40 years, which is probably more than most of the audience have been alive. But, and I think that one of the things that worries me most is the fact that torture seems to have almost undergone a rejuvenation. It seems to be commoner than it ever has before. And at the same time, we have most governments, and particularly, interestingly, governments in countries which themselves don't torture, denying that torture is a problem, refusing to fund programs to help survivors of torture. And I won't use the phrase victims of torture. I hate that. Unfortunately, it's in the title of the UN organization, but we can't change what UN titles are. And I think that it's really important that we learn that. And
so you prefer the word survivor of torture?
Yes.
Yeah.
I think that the thing that we know is that people who have been tortured, or whose family members have been tortured, or whose community members have been tortured, because all of them are survivors of torture. Torture doesn't only affect the person who is tortured. It's designed to affect everyone, the community and the family, as well as being obviously particularly physically and emotionally bad for the person themselves. It also harms a lot of other people. And it's getting commoner, and it's not being regarded as important. you try getting the media to cover the issues. It doesn't surprise me that the incident, I'm going to call it that, I can't think of a polite word for it, in Chad was not covered in much of the Western media. And that's because it doesn't somehow resonate in people's daily lives, and it needs to. We need to somehow make torture relevant to everyone, because if we have that, then we have a chance of affecting politicians and getting money, but also political commitment. Why should they work with governments that abuse human rights of their own people, or even of people who are transient through their country? It doesn't really matter, but they're affecting people's rights. And that's the thing that I think that we have got to concentrate on. That will deliver the money, that will deliver the help, but it will also stop torture from happening.
Isidore, do you want to respond to that?
Yeah, I think I will echo exactly what you said. I'm much more younger with 10 years experience on this, but I think we basically see the same thing. I have a word that comes from the Latin languages. I'm a French speaker and also Spanish speaker, and the word is in Spanish is los incontables, which means those. And it has a polysemic comprehension. I will show you a bit with this polysemic dimension what it means. So it's first of all those we cannot count in terms of number. So exactly so we see the victim itself, but we don't see all the other people that are also affected. So there is a dimension of numbers, and all the figures that were given by Lisa here is also only a symbolic dimension of the number of people involved into this. But it also has the other part of the stories. So it's about telling the story. In French will be conter une histoire. So it's about what is not said about these people. No? So the media and all the other dimensions is always about the spotlights. When we speak about the 20th October, I've been fighting and struggling with media, telling them it's the 20th and the days following, because it's something continuing. But when we tell this story, we tell what shocks us the most or what we are able to accept. But in fact, we are not able to accept torture, and our brain, our system is kind of trying to capture something and just close the eyes on the rest of the thing. So it also has a dimension of this, on the story we are able to tell, and maybe we're not even able to tell this story. It also has the dimension of now the accountability of it. So it's also, and this is for me the most important challenge. Because we want to close our eyes, because the people who torture also have a story, has a narrative, if we don't know more about Chad, it's also because these people manage to hide this, they manage to present it in a certain way, that people say, oh, we can go with it. So what is still failing is, for me, the accountability dimension of it. How do we make sure that these people start counting in terms of numbers, counting because their story should be told, and counting because they should count as human beings? So the justice dimension, the redress dimension, the rehabilitation dimension, with what makes them back as human beings, is maybe the most important challenge I've seen into this.
As you, great audience here today, know, we do panel discussions by democracy here in the great human rights city of Bergen, and you have voted throughout the break on the questions that you would mostly want our brilliant panelists to respond to. And the question that the audience really wants to know, and I'll give it to you, Charbonnel, is what support is needed from the global community to improve the human rights situation in Chad? I mean, you were talking about accountability, which is, of course, requires a well-functioning legal system, but how can the international community contribute?
For us in Chad, we think that the international community can play a crucial role, important role in taking the government of Chad accountable to know that tortures, because the government of Chad has ratified many conventions, as Delphine said. We are good in the ratifying conventions and mechanisms, laws, but they are not good in the applying it in the practice. They don't put it in the practice. But what partners of Chad, especially European Union, because they are a good part of Chadian government, is to make a pressure on the Chadian government to apply what the engagement that they take in front of the international opinion and also national opinion, to say tortures, we know that tortures is not good for the society, and then torture is prohibited. They know about that, and it is time to apply it. It's not good to keep it just in the high level of the government somewhere, but it needs to come down to a lower level in order to help people to know that the practice of tortures is prohibited. All the government agencies of Chad should know that tortures is prohibited and is condemned. For not reason we can use tortures. Because now in Chad people try to use torture just for the means to fighting terrorists. No. And also saying for the security reason. No. We cannot use torture for the means of fighting terrorists for the security reason. Torture is prohibited. And the government of Chad should respect his engagement.
It's interesting because we were talking in a break and you were saying that you sometimes get a visitor from a police officer and you have to explain to him that torture is prohibited. He doesn't necessarily know that. And that's kind of hard to even comprehend, that that's not a general knowledge, that they do it absent the knowledge that it is illegal and absolutely prohibited.
Now if you come to a police station in Chad, gendarme stations, and even some of the government authorities of Chad, they don't know about UN Convention against torture. They don't know completely about that. And that is a big issue for our country. Because for them as police or soldiers, what they know and what they teach them is to use tortures to get information, to use tortures to control. Because now torture become as a tools for the government to control the citizens of Chad, for them to have a kind of security under bracket, but not is for the security of the population, but is the security of their power, not for the population. But they must know that all the police leaders, all the officer leaders, all the administrative leaders, they should know that torture is prohibited.
I see you nodding over there. Vivienne, do you want to expand on this?
I think one of the more exciting developments is the fact there's a lot of effort now going into preparing materials and programs to help countries to educate the people with the kind of positions, authority, power, who may be able to control whether torture takes place or not, and to understand that it's not just about the government ratifying the conventions. What matters is those conventions being put into practice. So they are part of national law, but more than that, they are embedded in the way in which people are treated. Because that's what makes the difference. Yes, it's great that so many countries have signed the Convention Against Torture, but if they then ignore it, as they are in Chad, then that's no help to the actual individual. And that's one of the important things. It's not part of the UN Voluntary Fund's role, but one of the things that we've been exploring with a number of the organizations we meet internationally is how they can help to prepare materials and then work with governments. So, for example, there's a very interesting initiative in the small island states of the Pacific to actually do this. They're fairly new at ratifying the convention, so there's a real opportunity to step in and to change the systems as well. But we need to do that, and we need to do it in every continent. And Africa is going to be one of the most difficult because we have to deal with all the sensitivities about languages and other things. And we also have to deal with the fact that governments may be fragile. And that in itself, torture is, we mustn't forget that torture is used to keep people in power. You said that, it was said very elegantly, and Fred said that as well. This is why it's used. And they know the governments that they're breaking the law, But that doesn't matter if it keeps them in power, because after all, if you're in power, who's going to actually prosecute you? And that's the other thing that's actually been a great advantage. There's been one or two very successful cases of prosecutions against torturers carried out, where the legal case has been carried out in, say, Germany, even though that's nowhere near where the torture took place. And that means that torturers are beginning to learn that they don't have impunity, that they can be got even if they don't leave the country where they're protected. And that's very, very valuable.
And that goes to your point, I guess, Isidore, and the next question that the audience wanted you to respond to, which is, what are important tools in order for holding the ones who execute torture accountable? I mean, we do talk about a legal system within the country that's not functioning, and what can the international society then do? And you're talking about sort of fighting impunity, but how do we move forward?
I would maybe like to share the story of a survivor. We helped getting justice to the UN system, to the Human Rights Committee, who died here in Norway in August. I'm telling this because he taught me something very important. He said something once that's still in my mind. He said, I want to let them know that torture is expensive. So he was tortured by the Cameroonian security forces in 2000 or something, and he managed to escape, and he was accepted here as a refugee. We helped him filing a complaint at the UN Human Rights Committee, and he won the case. But then came the moment of the reparation. So the government was ready to give him 20 million francs. I don't know how much is that in euros or in Norway currency, but it was already quite something. But he said, no, I want 500 million. So until he died, he never got that money for sure. And they were into negotiation. But when I met with him, I asked him, but that's already something. You know, why are you refusing it? And he told me, I want them to know that torture is expensive. And that if they torture 2-3 people like this and they have to pay this 500 million, they won't have enough money to pay people. So I think the role of accountability is also confronting a government. So the government is sometimes ready to protect 2-3 small officials until you let them know that they cannot cover this, that they cannot take this under their hands. They have to punish the people that are, so it's the individual responsibility. So I think one thing that we should focus on, it's really this accountability dimension. It's also pushing a state as an entity to dive, how to say that, put himself with individuals that are responsible of this and put them in front of it. That will send a clear message. So when they come, for example, to the UN Committee Against Torture, they say, we are training our security officials on torture framework, etc. But the training does not go with the sanction. I think when people will learn through sanction, training won't be that expensive anymore. The torture dimension will be expensive. So this is the one thing for me that should be very clear, that our role as international community, as the states that support various states using torture, it's also clearly to distinguish, to divert yourself from a torturous environment. You know, when we speak about Chad, an important point of the debate is which state at the international level are supporting this government. I think sometimes we want to turn the blind eye on this, but we have to face this. And what are they telling them when it comes to torture? Which, with slavery, are the 2 most prohibited, without exception, crimes. So it has to be clear that the red line is there. When you get there, the people involved into this. So for me, one question that is very simple is that, will the people involved in the torture, the arbitrary detention, the disappearances of the 20th of October, are these people will be identified, brought before a court, judged, and sanctioned? It's a very simple case. And each government at international level should ask this question to the government of Chad. You want to fund your military, you want to fund your justice or whatever, I'm ready to help you for your development and whatever you want. But the simple condition is that the people that are involved into this are identified, judged, and sanctioned. And then we can continue with the development work we're doing.
And now you're also describing, I mean, binding human rights obligations under Article 14 of the Torture Convention, providing effective remedies also for for victims, and I think that's an interesting perspective and a very important one. Charbonnel, do you want to expand on this? The importance of accountability and providing redress and compensation for victims to be used as a tool to push forward in the battle against torture.
Yeah, when you are dealing with a corrupted government, it's not easy because we don't have a independent justice in Chad. No. That's one problem. All the government of Chad thinks they're independent, up to Idriss Déby, Itno, and Mahamat Idriss Déby. They don't know that. They know that torture is prohibited, but they use torture. And Hissène Habré, when Hissène Habré was took, Delphine is well placed to explain. When Hissène Habré was taken to the court, at that time, some of the people start to say, wow, Hissène Habré is a power man. Why they took him to the court? Because he tortured people? They said, no, it is not normal. One of the chief of the police told me, he attended our workshop, he said, no, Charbonnel, in my life, I don't know that torture is, what is torture? He told me what is torture. He doesn't know that what is torture. And now you, human rights defender, you took Hissène Habré to the court for the reparation of the victim of torture. He doesn't know that torture is, torture doesn't know what doesn't mean torture. But dealing with the government like in Chad is another thing. And at the international level is another thing. You know? The government can be accountable, but the perpetrators, they are free. Most of the DDS of Hissène Habré agents who are arrested now, some of them continue to be in the high-ranking position of the Chadian government. And also, and also in the police, administrative. Yeah. You know, this is quite a bit difficult for Chad, you know, compared to other countries. Yeah. It is a circle. It is a system that is put in place. Up to now, we have DDS agencies that are continue to be generals, high commanders of armies, high commander of police, and they continue to treat the victim. They continue to have a power on the victim. They continue to silence victim of tortures.
Vivienne,
just very briefly, I mean, the importance, therefore, of the strategic litigation taken in other countries is that they concentrate on the highest possible level that they can get to. Because if they do that, that's going to scare the people below them. It's going to make them realize that nobody has impunity. And so it really is important. And we need to celebrate all the successes that they have in those and to encourage more countries to work. And it's one of the great things. I mean, one of the things that the fund has increasingly spent a lot of its money on has been supporting centres doing strategic litigation of this sort. And they make partnerships with countries like Chad and say, you know, how can we work with you? Now, you know, I know from here that there are human rights defenders, including lawyers, who have great skill and knowledge and who can help them, and that's exactly what they're looking for. So I think Chad has a future within that group, and that might make a political difference, but it takes time.
We have talked quite a lot today about rehabilitation, and the third question that the audience is curious about is how torture survivors are met when they're seeking refugee in other countries, like European countries. And when I was working with this panel discussion, I was a bit surprised because the Norwegian Red Cross, they've done a quite substantive assessment of that in Norway, and they're quite critical. They're saying that there's really not a proper system for this, even in Norway. How's your perception of the sort of Europe as a whole?
I think Europe as well, I think the world as a whole is not great at dealing with refugees. I mean, that's the politest way of putting it. The first thing is that most countries seem to think that the second a refugee arrives on their shores, they will say, I was tortured. And those who've gone through it know that that's the last thing that people will do. It takes time to develop the trust in the people you are talking to to be able to expose the fact that you've gone through this.
Simply identifying it.
Yeah, I mean, you can't identify yourself unless you trust the person you're talking to is not going to be an agency of this state, the new state that you're in, that might also be a torturing state for all you know. You hope it won't be, but it might be. And given that most states are trying to do their best to send refugees and asylum seekers back, either where they came from immediately or to their original home, you know, why should people immediately trust them? So we have to deal with that. We have to deal with the fact that politicians putting these processes in place don't understand why people don't immediately, they arrive on the shores of a safe country, like my country, like Britain. It's relatively safe, theoretically, but people don't say straight away. It takes time. And there are good organizations, so, you know, there is freedom from torture and all those kinds of organizations. I was involved in setting that up when it was the Medical Council for the Rehabilitation of Victims of Torture. The point about it is that they know that it takes time, and we have to use that expertise to help countries understand that and to change their systems so that the newly arriving refugee asylum seeker is encouraged to get help and to begin to develop trust so that they can expose what happened to them in their own time. Because that's part of the process of rehabilitation. It's about taking back power. And the biggest way in which you take back power is to decide who and when you tell your story.
Well, given all those factors, to sort of try to end this on a more positive note, people can heal.
Oh, absolutely. And the great thing, and the IRCT can give you statistics on this, and the Voluntary Fund can give you statistics, because all of us have got collected statistics from many different providers of service, is that healing is possible. But can I just give one cautious note on that? If you come to a country and you think, and you're healed, you're helped, you get better, and then the politics of that new country changes. So, for example, Muslim refugees in a country which suddenly develops from the government anti-Muslim rhetoric can be re-traumatized by that. So we need to recognize that people who have been traumatized need support and understanding in the long term, not just when they are acutely ill.
We'll have to wrap up this discussion, and I'll thank the two of you. Do you want to have some final words before we will wrap up the discussion, Isidore?
I think just on the refugee dimension, I think also, and I see the closeness of Europe on this dimension, but I think it's also because there's been in the last even years a mixture of concepts. Refugee being now put in a global concept of migrants, then it puts everything completely different. I think for us, what is simple and which reflection of our humanity is the mobility dimension. I think when people come from wherever they're coming, fleeing conflict and coming in Europe, for example, to get protected, once they are treated and rehabilitated, most of the time they go to the next step, which is the mobility. They start starting to return back home, to bring support home, to go to conferences. They start being a human, which means because they return to their full humanity, they want to return. So there is no such thing as coming, staying, stealing, whatsoever people has flagged and creeps the atmosphere. I think this is also something, a debate people should first clarify the concept and also return to who we really are, human beings, and what we are able to do when we are healed.
Returning to humanity, that's very beautiful. I want to thank the two of you, Vivienne and Isidore. Thank you for participating in this panel discussion. And if you will stay here with me on stage while we give them a warm welcome. Thank you, Amin. We have now arrived at the end of this conference. Dear Charbonnel, for final remarks, I would like to ask you some questions. Yesterday at the dinner, you talked about how the mountains of Bergen could send winds of democracy towards Chad. And I was hoping that you maybe could wrap up this this seminar with your views on whether this conference gives you some hope and whether these winds will blow strongly after this.
Yes, you see how people from Norway, that the mobilization since we came here in Norway is showing that people from Norway are really concerned about human rights, respect of human rights, and also they are really concerned about the work that AJPNV is doing down in Chad, because it's for me, I didn't think that when I will be in Norway, I will have many people in front of me listen to what is going on in Chad. It is a privilege, and I am very, very happy. For that reason, I said yesterday that I know Norway with through human respect of human rights. I know Norway with his capital Oslo, that refer to always Peace Prize, Rafto Prize. And for that reason, I said from the mountain of Bergen, I want to see the wind of the democracy flow down to Chad, because we need to have a good partnership. When you develop a good partnership with someone, maybe you will share with him the best practice, how he's doing to help his people, his community. And for that reason, we want to see that a good partnership, not just from AJPNV and Rafto Foundation, but from people from Norway and people from Chad, and why not from Norway government and Chadian government. Maybe it can be an opportunity, an open door to develop a good partnership and to look to the side of respect of human rights. You know, Norway have a partnership with other European Union, especially France. Maybe Norway can help France to help Chad to change. Yes, because we want to talk. I want to talk about helping each other, because Norway have a good relationship with Paris, with France, and they can help France to help Chad to improve human rights.
I think that sounds like a great idea. So we'll
Yes.
all do the best that we can. Before we leave for today, I want to remind you all of the Rafto Prize Awards ceremony tomorrow, Sunday, 13th of November at 6 p.m. at the national scene here in Bergen. I hope many of you will join us there and for the following torchlight procession at 7:15. There we will spread Charbonnel's light together, remembering in the words also of Amanda Gorman. But one thing is certain, if we merge mercy with might and might with right, then love becomes our legacy and change our children's birthrights. So let's leave it at that. Thank you all for coming here today. Thank you for this wonderful conference. Thank you to all the panelists and musicians, and thank you to you. Thank you.